Didn't think going to join us today.
I thought he was. I moved it up.
Ah, that's right.
Well, it's 1 o'clock, so we'll call this meeting to order. Roll call. Grant?
Here.
Breeze?
Here.
Benson?
Present.
Boyd?
Present.
Knowles? Present. Adoption of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or additions they'd like to make at this time?
Here it is.
Look like you're ready for court.
Looks like he's ready for springtime and summer.
And also,
Happen next week.
I'll take it that no one has anything to add.
I'll move we adopt the agenda.
Support.
Dries supports. All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of minutes, the adjustments.
Move the approval of the minutes of our meeting of June 2nd.
Anybody second? Grant supports. All in favor?
Aye.
To continue our conversations here, communications of the Compensation Commission. I'm thinking that we've got information from the clerk and maybe we want to wait to move that down to F2 because that's when we'll be talking about the clerk. So versus talking about it twice, just follow our order.
Yep, that sounds good. There is some data, I think, concerning the trustees.
And we're going to have the review of salaries.
Okay.
That's included in
Okay.
there.
That'd be good.
And so where we left last time, we had two trustees that had provided us information and two that hadn't. And Christy and myself both reached out to those folks to ask for additional information. And we heard from one trustee who said that they felt that the information provided by the other two trustees really encompassed the duties. So there wasn't anything additional added there. One of the things that my understanding is, as we talked about, the trustees and their various responsibilities, and just with the descriptions from the two that we had, that it's varied. And I've been kind of thinking about this just in my head, just that the ebbs and flows of business in terms of times when things are more demanding and not demanding. And my understanding is that, and perhaps somebody else could confirm this, but my understanding is that if a trustee is going over and above, they're working on something that's taking more time or it's more complex, what have you, that the board can actually make a decision to provide additional compensation for that. Is that true, Jim?
That's not the way I interpret that part of the statute. I
Okay.
think what that is that if a trustee took on being the zoning administrator,
Okay.
or this probably wouldn't happen, so it not worked in the clerk's office, but took an assignment or a contract to clean the parks or something, they could be paid in addition to that. Sometimes you'll see where the supervisor has a supervisor's salary and then is also paid as the assessor, usually in smaller townships.
Mhm.
But I don't think that someone says, we'll pay you this much more to be our representative on the planning commission. Although there are some places that pay for trustees or anyone other than the three administrators to go to specific meetings.
You're paid for the meetings.
Which is not, again, not part of the salary.
Right.
If there's a per meeting pay, you would determine the salary, the board could determine to add 100 or
Is it
150
referred to
or
as a
whatever
stipend?
per meeting, as a stipend. Yeah.
I've got
And
a
that's
note
what-
on that.
That's what I, just that there was, additional, the board could make a decision along those lines. Maybe I didn't know what all that encompassed.
Yes, the board could say, and we will pay in addition to the salaries this much per meeting, or they could even say, we'll pay this much for meeting on boards and committees outside the board of trustees,
Okay.
which is something that this body can't do.
Right, oh, no, I understand that, just in terms of trying to
Or could
get.
assign additional duties, a simplification, and decide to compensate someone who was assigned those additional duties. No.
Yes, but the way that Chairman Knowles first described it, I wouldn't say that they would say, oh, you've worked so hard on the zoning ordinance that we're going to give you an extra $500. That wouldn't happen.
But
You know,
could
this
it
would be
be,
something that's explicitly assigned by the board. The duty.
Yes.
Yes.
It's typically referred to as a stipend assigned per meeting is my understanding.
questioning Jim in terms of if there was some big project that came on and a particular trustee took that on and it was acknowledged that this was going to be expensive. Is it something where the board could say, this is going to take a lot and we're going to provide some additional compensation for the time in which you is going to be required to deal with that?
I can't give you a firm answer, but I think not.
Okay.
Now, has there been any discussion at our Board of Trustees of doing something like compensation per additional meeting they attended or anything?
Not in the 2 years I've been paying attention.
Okay.
Commissioner Brandt goes to many more Board of Trustee meetings than I do.
I don't get paid
But,
either.
yeah.
Okay, well, it's one of those things where I wasn't sure exactly how that worked and I just wanted to put that out there so that we make sure we knew what we were dealing with.
So just a question on that. So the stipend, I know, I think it's Pittsfield Township pays $100 per meeting stipend to their trustees. Is that $100 per meeting in it, you know, the Board of Trustees meetings, which is twice a month, and then other meetings that that individual may take part in?
The trustees are paid a salary
Yeah.
plus a per meeting for Board of Trustees meetings. Of course, there is a trustee representative to the CBA and the Planning Commission. I know that planning commissioners are compensated. I don't know if the trustee gets the additional compensation.
Yes, they do. I was that person. Okay.
In Pittsfield?
In our township from 040 through 08. I was the
Okay.
township board's representative on the planning commission.
And I don't think that's changed.
Monica, what did you just say?
I don't think that's changed since Jim was on the board.
Oh, as in it's still in place?
Just for attendance on the planning commission.
Okay, yeah, I didn't realize that, so.
We should,
But not per
we should
meeting.
verify that, but.
And that was assigned by the board.
Christie might know.
We go do that. The ZBA gets paid too.
I don't think there's a trustee on the ZBA.
There's Kathy.
Sorry.
Kathy Knoll.
Oh, that's recent. As an alternate.
She's right.
As an alternate.
So continuation of trustees' responsibilities and somewhat our thoughts of how we're looking at these roles and the compensation. Does anybody want to go
Well,
forward on this?
I think that it's the same for any position that we're going to recommend on that Attorney Fink has advised us that it really is about the position and the duties of that position, and not the person that does additional work. But I would suggest that for the trustees, and I said this in the last go around, there is an expectation, if not a unwritten policy, that board members are on at least one other committee or commission. And so with that said, and if you start to count up the number of meetings that some of these trustees go to, so there's basically 24 Board of Trustee meetings, if you take 2 per month. There's special meetings, so there's ones on top of that. Let's say that they were on a board that met once a month, that's an additional 12. So I got to 36 plus whatever the specials were. Now, some trustees are on more than one, so they're upwards to 48 meetings per year. And so I put a note up here, folks, I put this data up here because I'm a visual person and I need to see it so we don't have to go back and say, what was that? So the trustees currently have no stipends.
They do have $600 in retirement that's also given.
That's not a per meeting, right? And
No,
that's
it's
not,
per meeting.
and that's
It is-
not for us to
No,
determine.
we don't determine that. But
Right,
that
so
would be
that's-
part of a
that's-
package. when you're
That's
looking
not
at
relevant to
overall
this discussion.
compensation.
If we are not determining it, that is something the board decided, that's not in our purview to talk about.
You're looking at salary compensation only.
Only. So to continue my thought process, that they go to a lot of meetings. There was some feedback that
This is first quarter planning commission.
I think,
Thank you.
you're welcome. That would be validated. You're welcome. So there was some feedback that for staff to administer a stipend policy is a lot of work. So whether we recommend it or the board adopts it, I would take the input that it's a lot of work for staff to accumulate that and figure out which meetings. But I would like to have some consideration for that participation included in the salary. So, I just counted up to, I was at 50 meetings for someone like, actually Kathy Knoll is much higher than that, but somebody that was on 2 committees plus special meetings. And if there was a stipend, that would be an additional $5,000 a year. So I would like consideration to consider that when we come to the base salary number. And again, it doesn't matter which trustee, one has a lot of assignments, one does not. It's across the board.
So it's also, I don't know if it's as much, it's not always assignment, as there's also people that want to be involved with they have certain interests.
Well, it's an appointed, they're appointed by the board.
I think that somebody says, we've got this particular one and a particular trustee can say, I want to be involved in this. And I suppose 2 people could want to be involved in the same thing. But I don't think that they're all necessarily, you're going to do this, you're going to do that.
I didn't say that, but so it still stands to reason that you should come up with a number that is fair for all trustees that takes that into account. I'm not advocating to give one more versus the other. In fact, I'm not advocating for a stipend at all because I took the input that why would we put that burden on the staff? So
Clarify for me, when you say the burden on the staff.
that means they have to account for every meeting that the trustee would go to.
Oh, okay, to put it in the system and compensate it. Yeah, okay,
Manually record that
okay.
and be accurate, not stir the hornet's nest. You owe me $200, whatever. So I would advocate to put a fair number in there and add it to the base salary.
Is there an expectation that each trustee serve on at least one?
There is, that's what I said, it seems to be an unwritten
Okay,
board policy. And the charters for most of these says it'll be board representation.
okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that, my understanding is that somebody could decline, but there is the expectation, and that expectation leads to participation on these committees. And some trustees are more generous with their time and clearly they're interested in the topic, but it still benefits the township.
Now, is there any impact on that participation that's anticipated now that we have the new manager person, or if there's a new financial person that's brought into the township? I wouldn't think there would be, but I also.
If they had to record a stipend,
No,
or if the manager would be capturing information that the.
yeah, well,
trustees-
if the expectation that the Board of Trustee involvement would be less if we had more staff, or with the appropriate staff, as opposed to an assumption that there'll be a board liaison at all the different.
Well, it's not an assumption because it's in the committee's charters.
Okay.
They have
May I make a comment? Sure, probably shouldn't, but I want to. Some committees that the board liaisons serve on are not paid, are unpaid. So John Reiser does serve on LPC as the board rep, which is unpaid.
Right, so we're noting it's
That's
an
why I want-
exception just for the planning commission.
I'm just saying, ZBA and planning are paid,
Right.
but
None of the other
none of the
members
others are paid.
are paid, but the
Correct.
planning commission and ZBA are paid.
That is
Everybody's paid.
Correct.
Okay, and Reiser receives the same stipend that anyone who is appointed to the planning commission receives.
Yeah.
But he also serves on a committee that is an unpaid committee.
Right, and no one on that one is paid. Nobody gets
Correct.
mileage or pay.
That is correct.
Right. Now, there may also be people who are trustees who are appointed to a board or a commission by some other authority. I was appointed to the County Board of Public Works, and I was paid by the county, not by the township. Maybe some township trustee might get appointed to, I don't know, the secretaries of state's wonderful commission on voting rights. And be paid mileage and a stipend for that. Again, the township would remunerate that trustee.
No, and I wouldn't include it in the,
But if it's.
in the notion of,
Yeah.
of how many meetings they go, that those other meetings benefit the township certainly, but.
And then also I know that certain governments, when people do attend things that they've been authorized to attend, may submit a request for a per diem payment. Okay. I know that's what happened in the county a while ago, and those rules were greatly revised after they've been abused a bit. Well,
All right, so getting back to your suggestion, Kathleen, in terms of recognizing all that additional time as additional salary. When we compare salaries from other similar townships, is there a way we see what other time obligations those trustees would have in those other townships, or is there?
Well, we know in Pittsfield Township, they get paid per diem per board
okay.
meeting. We don't know if they get per diem for other attendance.
Okay,
And their base salary is,
Basically, let's see,
5,500.
5,500, yeah.
okay. So 5,500 plus per diem for the Board of Trustees meetings, but we don't know about
We
other.
can assume that they have 24 board meetings.
Yeah.
So they're already there at almost 8,000, and if they get additional,
Okay.
but different policy, different.
Is there database information that like the Michigan Township Association has that would have additional?
I looked at it 2
Okay.
years ago and I don't believe that I saw anything of stipends.
They don't have any of the
paid for
details.
addition. They don't have the details, no.
Okay. Okay,
So at the last meeting, I talked about a historical inflation rate, and I did that for a reason. And the reason is that trustees and officers, but my mindset was trustees, had been at a rate of 5,500 up until 2018. or something like that. Then they got bumped up to 7,000, and then in our last go around, we did it at 75. So my thought process was, what would be the rate if we applied these inflation factors? And I haven't done the calculation, but I said I would bring the numbers. So there's big numbers, of course, in the past 2 years. So if we had taken that into account, we would bump their salary anyway.
There's a bunch of different CPIs.
Yeah.
CPI urban, CPIW and so forth. Which one are you using?
I'm using, this is the current rate of US CPI. So whatever the US government establishes, they probably apply to Social Security because we got that.
No, CPIW is the one that's applied to Social Security.
Is there gonna be that much of a difference?
The bump between January of 2021 through December 2022 was about 7.8% over those 2 years.
You know, and at the same time,
That's
though,
from BLS,
years
right?
before, where you had, like in 2016, it was 0.3.
Right.
So kind of averaging that out.
Right.
But it's in the same trend.
Yeah, it is, and it might be, it's an idea that I think is applicable. Okay. And you know, we can talk about which rate is the most appropriate. The other thing that I'd like to mention in terms of inflation or adjustment rates is rates that are legislation that governs tax assessment or property assessments. Proposal A in Headley limits the growth of property, real property assessments, particularly residential property, primary residential property, to 5% or the CPIW, or whichever is less. Okay, and most recently in the last year, we got up to that 5% threshold countywide. That's the one that taxpayers are probably most familiar with when they see their rate. And the one, if we say, okay, we're going to go above that rate for some reason, we might hear more from taxpayers about it.
Do we have an idea of the township income over those years?
Yes, we do. Actually, that data was, there was, what I think is a sound analysis provided by the clerk that talks about median income in the county and Scio as well.
You mean in the information from this last 2 weeks? Or is this
Page 9
prior?
on the.
So that's earnings.
That's not the income of the township.
Yeah, not the income of the township is what I was wondering about, so.
So what, just in terms of how much we're taking in taxes.
How does that relate to an individual's cost of living? I know it relates to the township's ability to spend money.
Yeah, actually, that was the only connection.
The budget.
If it were a business, you wouldn't be talking about just increasing, salaries without knowing that there's some sort of income to pay for it, but.
I think that's a good question.
Figure that out.
Okay. You have to take a look at the tables that were the source of this, but it's not clear in the graphic whether these are household incomes or personal incomes or per capita incomes.
It says source is the US
Source is the
Census
US.
and the whatever
Right,
CS 5-year estimate subject.
right.
Okay, so there is a source listed.
But it doesn't say whether it's personal income or household income. And those are very different numbers. It may be the median of all people in the workforce age 25 and above, but it doesn't say so.
Your numbers, guy.
I was abused by an expert.
Education can be very, yeah.
Refer you to Patty Becker at Maine State University sometime. She's passed, but
So Kathleen, did you finish
This
your,
looks like it's the US Census, the American Community Survey, which let's drill down and see what this says. I'm not sure. I'd have to dig into this more to see if it's individual or household.
did you finish your thoughts?
But I had two strings of consciousness there. One was that if you take into account, not that we would be making, well, take into account that we would bump it up based on an average number of meetings attended to make it equitable. And or we look at prior 5,500 from what 2018 or whatever and apply inflationary rates. It was more, it's trying to get it a subjective view and fairly compensate for levels of effort without burdening the staff for a manual accounting of meetings.
Okay.
When you looked at, because I did, put some pencil to a paper to kind of work through some numbers, just in terms of inflationary. And I used a Minneapolis, the Fed inflation calculator to say, okay, what were you being paid in 2012? What does this look like 2013? And I was surprised at, I didn't think we're that far off. And it kind of surprised me really. But just in terms of the inflation numbers and those sorts of things where, we look at this past year and it's been, a very unusual time period. But, when you blend it out over those 10 years, it kind of averages itself out to be, a little more, I won't say reasonable, but.
It averages out to what? To what we've been giving as increases?
Well, I looked at one, so using that consumer price index from the Fed, that in 2012, a trustee was making $5,387. That was
Okay.
the salary. And what that would be equivalent to in 2023 per this calculator was $7,265. And I thought it surprised me. I thought that it would, and I thought, well, we're in the ballpark. I think that I want us to be reasonable. I want us to be able to keep up with inflation.
Does it include 2022?
It does.
Yes.
It went to 23. That's what I did, 2012 to 2023. So those were the numbers that I got, as I said, from the Fed calculator. So,
And that was the train of thought I was going to use.
Yeah. So, people being paid per meeting, and to your point, I don't want to put any more burden on anybody else. Again, I'm not a trustee. I don't know that the trustees have been pushing back saying they wanted more per meeting, or if that has even come up in conversation. I haven't heard any rumblings about that, but that doesn't mean that hasn't occurred. And also too, as you've commented, some trustees and, we're kind of making a broad brush stroke with people because different executions, different interests. And also, some people are just a little sharper, a little quicker. They can get things done more quickly than somebody else can. And
I don't think I don't want to introduce that concept.
well, no, but as I mentioned,
I would introduce it as level of effort to sit in
Yeah,
a chair and
I think
go
that's
to
good.
a meeting for sure.
well, I had made a comment at a different meeting, and this wasn't, I've worked with some really smart people where it took them a long time to come to conclusion in terms of making that final decision. And I've worked with some people who are doing it day in, day out, and just knock it out. And so I think that time commitment is certainly a factor. I just don't think it's the only factor. I think it's just one of the components.
But again, we can't apply that factor if one trustee comes to a meeting unprepared. I've seen it. Pat says this.
Yeah.
I've seen other ones that can show you what page, wait, this is an issue on this particular page. But we have to balance that between four people, four positions.
And we don't know in 2024 who
Who's
will
gonna
be there.
Thank you for that reminder.
So-
And we're not doing performance evaluation.
Exactly.
We're setting, across the board salary. Performance evaluation happens in August and November.
I think we've sort of fell into that trap a little bit last.
Yeah.
I'm gonna avoid that this time.
And also it's important to think about where the pool comes from. It comes from, you have to live in Scio Township. And what is the incentive for somebody to become a trustee? It's not money. But it would be nice to,
It's not money, that's correct.
But
it has to be worth somebody's time to
Right.
participate.
for a trustee, I can't see anybody saying, I'm gonna be trustee for $7,500 a year. On the other hand, if they have this level of expectation, there should be, let's just put it this way, do all townships compensate for trustees? I think so.
Yeah.
Then,
I didn't understand where you said nobody's gonna say for $7,500, I'll be a trustee.
right,
You're not doing it for the money.
I
No.
would,
Oh, you're saying that isn't the motivation.
It might be,
Okay,
I'd like to be a trustee. You get paid for that?
yeah,
know.
that's kind of what I was.
right,
um,
now, some of these other positions maybe, because they're full-time and professional, they're considered,
A different deal.
yeah.
So, and I know we might get some varied responses to this, but let's say over the last 10 years, have we had enough candidates that were interested and, over that period of time, that's 3 different elections probably. Has there been a shortage of trustees? And I would argue that maybe there has been from the resignations that we saw in the last year.
Well, 2020, there were a lot of candidates and they went through the primary to get it down to whatever the,
Okay,
I think
but
it
that
would-
doesn't mean that trend will
Yeah.
stand for 2024.
I think it's also when people are unhappy, then they're thinking, we need to change.
yeah.
And if you're gonna have a change, let's have some input into this versus when things are going along, everybody's like, oh, check the box, it's okay. So to say how many people are interested or not interested, I think is a reflection in part on what the temperature is politically within the township. So the fact that there were a lot of people were, not feeling love.
Yeah, well, if you attended the public hearing for the fire millage, there were some bullets being thrown about the board. Citizens were not happy with the way it was communicated to them. Just from that meeting, I'd be going, I don't think I want to be a trustee.
Okay. Yeah. All right, the other thing that is always a caution in terms of looking at historic numbers and just applying to CPI is that we don't really know if 2012 or your starting point, we don't really know if that was a good number, great number, or not so great number. And that's a classic thing in the employment world that you don't want to just base somebody's new salary on their old salary, because that, now that isn't particularly useful in terms of our discussion, but just as a reminder that,
I think also too, going back 10 years, you know, I didn't think that it was, I think we kind of all kind of the same mindset that go back a few years wouldn't have really been, and we just needed more data. That, you know, the last few years have been odd on a lot of levels. So, you know, but you gotta draw the line somewhere. You know, I don't think we want to go back 20 years.
yeah.
So, my recommendation would be that we take the current 7,500 and come up with a reasonable amount to add to compensate for all the meetings that folks go to. And acknowledging there's a range of how many meetings different trustees go to.
Well, what kind of number are you thinking about?
Well, I just laid out that the trustees, 24 meetings, just board meetings. They have special meetings. If you're on one committee, you're at 36. If you're on two, you're at 48. And then add on the special meetings and you're easily at 50.
You know, I think though, you know, if somebody's running as a trustee, somebody decides I want to be a trustee, they know that there's 2 meetings a month. I don't think there should be additional compensation for those.
Well, I think it's comparing to what other townships are doing. They're recognizing that level of effort. And the base salary, you could say that effort is strictly to educate on the issues, read the packets, do anything else you need to do. Any other meetings, any other committees are on top of that.
I think in terms of looking at the other committees and those time commitments, you know, something to consider, but you know, 2 meetings a month to be a trustee, I think that's part of the deal. I don't think, you know, that's my personal opinion.
That's not how they view it in Pittsfield Township, for
But
example.
we're not in Pittsfield Township.
But we're comparing to,
And their base is 5,500.
we're comparing to the local governments where the positions are the same duties. Well, honestly, I think Pittsfield Township is too low. I mean, essentially, we thought that the last. So my suggestion, everybody has an opinion, is I have no problem taking 7,500 and averaging that they're attending 50 additional meetings, an additional $5,000. And if you want to negotiate from there.
I'll start negotiating from there. Well, I would argue that the level of responsibility as a liaison is not as high as it is sitting in a board of trustees meeting where you need to be responsible for making decisions, right? So, so if we say the value, like your example in Pittsfield Township, the value is $100 per meeting of the board of trustees, I would argue that the value per meeting of the other committees is not that much, because as a liaison, you're participating, but you're not responsible for making decisions so
They
much.
make decisions in those committees. They make decisions that lead to recommendations to the board. And they vote just like any other member. So they need to be just as informed.
Okay, all right, then never mind. That's a
No,
good
you
point,
still-
all right.
You can
But
still negotiate.
there are meetings where a trustee may attend where they're liaison ex officio. They don't vote. They may speak up, they may listen, they may advise, okay? Then there are others like ZBA and Planning Commission where they have a vote in the decision and recommendation of those particular committees or commissions. and they're compensated for that.
Okay.
So there's a difference in those responsibilities.
So currently for all of our committees, a board member has voting responsibility. The only current exception, and this is just strictly because of how they appointed, is John Reiser on the Parks, Pathways, and they ended up appointing too many people. John backed out. He still goes. He's not a voting member. He's ex officio, if you like to call it.
He attends.
He reports to the board on what they do.
Okay.
So you want to pitch me an offer?
I have a difficult time. First of all, we're gonna get into this in terms of the clerk's comments, and I think in terms of keeping things up to date, I think in terms of being competitive, I totally agree. I think that it's a process to get there. I think in terms of, 7,500 to 5,000, and adding an additional 5,000, that type of percentage increase, I have a really tough time with that. I think it's something you have, something you want to aim towards, and you work your way up to that. But I'd have a tough time supporting a $5,000 increase.
We don't have to decide today, right?
I'm gonna kind of agree with that basic sentiment that just looking at the numbers so far, I am not seeing a justification for that large an increase this year. But like you say, we're not making a decision today, but and you're waiting for a counteroffer that I'm not.
What I'm trying to get to is that we do a data-driven decision.
And
I think that's
I would
reasonable,
agree
yeah.
that's reasonable. And I would suggest that some measure of inflation, okay, the value of the dollar, might be a reasonable way to get where to get to a reasonable position. And we should continue to look at that.
Yeah, I'm still stuck in the $100 per meeting, at least for the Board of Trustees meetings. Because there's a lot of work that goes into preparing for that meeting. Hopefully people are preparing for that meeting. And how many pages are the packets? 150, 300 pages.
So
I'm not clear what you're proposing or what you're.
Of taking into, we haven't, and I don't know, I wasn't part of the commission last time, the 7,500 that was, proposed and adopted, did that take into account the time and effort of the trustees of attending meetings?
So, Danny, what's a reasonable number for board meetings, including special meetings?
I think $100 a meeting.
The number of meetings?
24, and how many special meetings they have? It depends on the year.
Absolutely.
Could be 4, 1 a quarter maybe. So that's 2,500.
So somewhere between 24 and 30. Right, 24 plus 6, or just go 24. I know they have special meetings.
Well, just 24 meetings a year is $9,900.
24 meetings times 100 is $2,400.
So it makes almost $10,000.
Yeah.
If
Oh,
you
you
add
went
it
to
to, if you add
You
it
applied
right
it, yeah.
But I would still like to look at the inflation numbers and those too.
Any other comments about the trustees?
Nope.
Well, moving along to review of clerk, this is a new conversation because we didn't have this information last time. We didn't have the description last time or the response from the clerk, so we have that. And obviously broad responsibilities. Who would like to begin that conversation?
Actually, I would like to start with trying to review what we did 2 years ago. Because I think we passed a resolution to lower that compensation. That doesn't actually affect Jessica, but as I recall, I didn't actually vote for that, but it might have been totally justified. I just don't remember.
It was 3-2. You and I voted no
Okay.
to reduce.
And do you remember the rationale for that?
This is where I think the committee got into personalities versus duties.
Oh,
And
okay.
I didn't want to do that again.
Okay.
It's also too that there had been a big increase in compensation for that position in 2000. This position went from 64,500 in 2018 to $84,000. It was a $20,000 increase.
Right, and there was a rationale for that. The rationale was that the clerk at that 65,000 was not doing all of the duties.
However, they were the clerk of the year in the state of Michigan.
Okay, I can finish that thought. They were not managing the financials, which is part of, which are duties for the clerk.
Okay.
And also, that went in front of the board. I'll find it. That went in front of the board in 2019, May 2019. The board voted unanimously to do that approval, and that was based on the justification that the clerk presented, and it was a unanimous decision. So I would not want to lower that and make an argument that it went up 20,000 because that board saw it as justified. So they had all the facts, they discussed it, they deliberated. They thought that was fair compensation. I would argue the clerk today, especially with Prop 2, just to be enacted for elections, their workload is going up for elections. They have more effort. There's 5 days of open voting this year not 5, it's 9 days. 9 days in November of early voting that needs to be staffed. So I don't think the argument that this boost of 20,000 is something that we should second guess that board. I think we should accept that board decision, and we should look at the position today and the comparables to other clerks.
Okay, yeah, I agree with everything you just said. It's gotta be a first. Okay. Okay, so. Monica, were you gonna start talking about Jessica, or is that just open? Are we open conversation now? Or?
Yeah, when Jessica had written, I think that this wasn't just about her position, but about others, that in terms of keeping up with, not staggering it, I think we've been in situations where we're trying to play catch up. And, as we have talked before, it's difficult because, John, you talk about, jobs you've had. I've had those jobs too. Somebody's doing a good job, somebody's doing a bad job. You reward it, you do those sort of things. And it's different from publicly official to public. But I think that in terms of, I feel like being on this board or being on this commission, and this is a whole new ballgame for me, is I'm also being representative of the people of Scio Township. And I think that, I want, good people. I want people to, work in the best interest of Scio Township. And I think there should be some attraction to do that work. I have a difficult time, and this is, I'm sure I can get past it, but I'm not there. In terms of giving people substantial raises that I think the percentages in terms of the numbers with inflation, cost of living adjustments, and that we can continue to increase this, So this is 2023, 2025, this commission will meet again and look at continual raises that, I believe that there should be more money that's involved. I have a difficult time with big percentage increase in one school. So, and that's, per Jessica, that we need to compensate people appropriately. But I don't think you just make that, check the box. And in part, going back to, I say my neighbors, but, I don't even know if my neighbors are, I say that facetiously. And somebody, are they getting those kind of raises? Because if somebody's looking at this, they're gonna ask. And I think, I just want to be responsible in that thought process.
That's a totally valid,
So, in that position, can you explain to me what the data is that supports that? Because I can argue the other side, that
The data that supports
not giving a person a,
big swoop raise or big.
yeah, it's not data driven, it's your gut tells you not to do that versus data.
Well, I have to tell you, I've been in the workforce for 40 years.
You do?
And I think in terms of somebody giving me a 40% increase, a 30% increase, that didn't happen very often.
I got it in 1995, I got a 30% increase when I joined the SAP project at Owens Corning, 30%, it blew my mind. And it was totally justified because with those new acquired skill sets, I could have left easily and gotten more money. So we should almost think of the clerk's position in 2019, it was a new position. It wasn't a bump of 20, it was a new position. And could this person go to a different township and get, what would they get in a different township? That's not the point, Monica, that's not the point. The point is that you're attracting from your own population and you want a certain level of skill to do the job well, and you want to attract people within your own community. So it is fair to compare to Pittsfield, Ypsi Township. It's completely fair. The duties are essentially the same statutorily. So I think what the clerk has suggested is data-driven.
based
Let
on,
me ask a question.
Based on,
Do we meet every year or every other
You
year?
meet every other year in odd number of years.
25 will be the next.
Okay. So this, whatever we determine will stand in place until November 2024 with the new election.
April 1st next
This
year.
is this,
It goes in effect
it goes into effect on
April
April 1st of
1st.
2024.
Okay,
So it will be the salary for people who take office in November 20th
okay,
of 2024. And then you will meet in 2025, and depending on whether you meet and make your determination before March 31st of 25 or after would determine when your next determination would take effect, which is something I had never thought about.
We
until
need to
that.
consider that.
That's up to you to consider it, but that is something for you
We need to consider it.
to consider, but, and remember that your determination now, regardless of what this commission in its 2025 makeup will be, the salaries only will not be reduced for the incumbents in 2025. Your salaries can only go up, similar to, I think you made a determination to reduce the clerk's salary, but she maintains the salary level because she's in the same term. A salary is not reduced during the term of office unless the office holder agrees, which.
But it would
you're
be-
familiar with.
Would be in November 2024 if we stayed with the 75,000. It would be reduced.
Yes, in November 20th, 2024, the clerk's salary will be whatever you determine this year. Even if it goes down, but it won't go down until November 2024, even though the fiscal year starts on April 1st.
So it's the start of a new term.
Right, but so that's why I thought in November 2024 that if we increase any of these, they went into effect in November.
No, they go into effect
They
April
go-
1st of this year.
Did we increase?
You increase. If
I got it.
you decrease, they
I
don't
got
take effect until.
It's only
November.
because it's only if it went down, that's the only time it would go into effect.
It would not go into.
Would not go into effect
Until November,
until November.
or if the person agrees.
And then the next bump is gonna be 2026.
You meet in 2025 and the determination that you make in 2025 will take effect at the beginning of the next fiscal year, which means that if you met in January or February of 2025, it could take effect on April 1st of 2025. I'd want to triple check myself on that, but I looked at it. If you meet on your regular schedule and you meet in June of 2025, it will take effect April 1st, 2026, just like this one will.
Then we'll go to
March 31st.
before March 31st, right?
Well, it takes,
So-
I'm sorry, if you make your determination,
Right. If determined. Before March 31st, then April 2025.
and then there are the statutory things that go along with it, like the board's ability to.
If you can make a read that, God bless you. But I got it in my head. I have to write these
You can
things.
take a picture of it.
I know. No, babe, don't talk about my handwriting is not legible for that last part. I know what it says.
Oh, for a think, that's very good.
It's a prescription.
All right, so we were talking, I think, both Jim and I, you said the 96,000 is data driven.
If you look on which page,
Yeah, just,
if you look on page 10, and honestly, when I saw this analysis, I said, we need to apply this same analysis for treasurer and for supervisor. The exact same analysis if it's applicable. and it is applicable for treasurer. Currently,
All right, I need you to show what your page 10 was, because I'm not,
The one that shows salaries of township clerks in the largest townships in Washington County.
right, so these bars represent, the different colors represent different townships.
Okay. And these are salaries for the,
Strictly clerk.
for the clerks, but they don't include any extra duties.
These are the duties of a clerk in these townships, which are the same as what they are in Scio Township.
I tried to get information about what the body of work is for the clerks, other than Pittsfield was the only one I was looking at Ypsi Township to look at, does that person supervise the finance team? In addition,
We can't
Yeah,
take
you
that because there are no job descriptions currently in Scio, right? And I put that up there because it's significant. So we can only evaluate based on statutory duties. So statutory duties for Pittsfield, Ypsi, and Superior for the clerk are the same
so
as.
it'll be the same, yeah, okay.
Okay, but are these numbers for their salaries? Do they include any assigned duties other than the statutory duties? Do we know?
I don't. Well, yeah, but we've had this discussion. If they had assigned duties, they don't get further if they have something beyond statutory, but I understood they don't get additional compensation.
And also too with the clerk, the treasurer, and the supervisor, maybe not the treasurer as much, but people have the opportunity to take on more responsibilities. And maybe there's been times when they've needed to, but now we have a township manager, who's taking on,
But these are separate. They're the duties of the officers
get that.
are completely separate than the manager.
Right,
And the manager, we do have a defined job description.
right.
So because we have a manager, does not make their duties less.
Oh, no, I don't think that they do, but I think prior to that manager, people may have been doing things outside of their basic job responsibilities.
And some of those may have been assigned by the board and with stated compensation.
Which was the case for Jack Knowles when there was no manager.
Right, yes, and yes, exactly.
Okay, so back to the data-driven question, and I do appreciate Jessica putting forth this information. Is there some reason why this type of analysis should be limited only to Washtenaw County as opposed to other counties that have similar size townships, population, income, that type of thing?
Well, I think the analysis includes that Washtenaw County is one of the wealthiest counties in the state, which drives cost of living consideration, housing. And you'd be hard pressed to find other counties similar. And I tried that thought process. I came up with gross EO. But their structure, they don't apply the same duties to these officers. And I said, okay, where else could we consider? I guess we could go to Kent County for Grand Rapids. I don't know if Traverse County is similar, although they have a huge, probably have a lot of seasonal. They may own property, but not live there all the time.
We may want to stick to, southeast Michigan, the greater Detroit area. Possibly there are townships in Macomb and Oakland County that might be comparable. Maybe not in population, but
Right.
certainly in demographics.
Okay,
You wanna go get that, John?
now I'm just asking a question, but that's, My concern is when you say data-driven, if you were judging that strictly from what we saw from Jessica, I would have an issue with that. But as you just mentioned, you looked at Kent County and some other areas.
Well, no, I don't mind going and looking at some of the other counties.
Yeah.
And my view of my responsibilities here is if I go out and do the research, I feel comfortable that the data is solid. It gives me a sense of what, that's what I decided that Grosse Ile is not really a fair comparison. Spring Lake as a township might be on the west side. But then to get this kind of data, a lot of times you have to get on the phone and call them. What is it? It's not on their webpage necessarily.
Although Pittsfield is, because I looked at their compensation commission and what their results were the last time. Set salaries, which I don't know if the other townships, Superior and Ypsilanti townships, I don't know how their salaries are, if their salaries are determined by a commission or no.
I don't think either of
The
those
board.
have compensation commissions.
I know that the first sentence under general information on submission suggests that the commission, we should consider how fixing the compensation levels can discourage or encourage large segments of township residents to seek township office. As you said before, we don't think that compensation alone is what encourages a trustee to run for this. They may have issues with environment or law enforcement and development and so forth. And those same things encourage people to run for clerk or supervisor, or should, not just the salary. But the only, anybody who can get 15 signatures on a petition and is a registered voter and can fog a mirror in Scio Township can run for supervisor or clerk. Okay. That's the only statutory qualification. They don't have to have an advanced degree. They don't have to have a high school degree. Okay. So speaking that discouraging large segments of township residents and implying that professional qualifications, as in a medical doctor or a JD and so forth, might be a requirement. I don't think that's an accurate statement.
I think that people, I could kind of go back to people run for office for different reasons. Well, we've been talking about this. I was curious, how much does Jocelyn Benson make? $112,000. In her former job, she made over $300,000 a year. She obviously didn't take that job for the money. So in terms of encouraging or discouraging, I don't disagree, but I think it's something where, what do we think is an appropriate amount for this position at this time? In terms of data-driven, we've got some comparisons with other townships. We've got some information with consumer price index, cost of living adjustments, Social Security. To say that somebody would be encouraged or discouraged, I don't think it typically is the money that drives somebody to run for office.
For a full-time position?
There's a lot of influence there.
Yeah, I
on the
don't think
full-time
that's
position.
complete volunteerism.
Well, I don't think so either. But as I mentioned, you got Jocelyn Benson making $112,000 a year and she used to make over $300,000. She didn't go for the money.
But you're talking about one person, one individual.
Well, Kathleen, it's kind
But
of like you got a 30% increase in 1 year, one person at one particular time. I mean, it's one of those, we can always find exceptions to the rule. And
That was not exception, that was market driven.
I've gotten market driven.
If I had left,
20%.
I would have got more than that and I could have easily left. But anyway, that was market driven. And let's try not to
But
compare.
the money didn't drive you away.
I had a certain amount of loyalty to the corporation.
I don't think putting Jocelyn Benson's salary out there is a good comparison because she probably gets security paid for and other perks that our elected officials don't get.
But she probably has security because it's
Yeah.
a dangerous world.
Right.
So she's taken on more danger. And that was a, you know, conscious decision to put herself in the line of fire.
So I don't guess that any of our executives need hostile fire pay so far.
I don't know. I
Hopefully
have to
not.
tell you, it gets a little feisty, those meetings.
Well.
I just think about
we
the
can talk about that
elections.
sometime.
I know. Absolutely, I was an election inspector and it certainly is in your head.
Any
Back you go.
Mhm. Mhm.
other comments on the clerk, review of the clerk's role or position or?
Where do we start? You know, the last time this commission met, I think the minutes showed that they recommended 75,000. And the board bumped it up to 84 or 85. Do we
It
start?
wasn't, the clerk was making 84.
We
We
see-
made a recommendation. And I think that the other two commissioners that you two are here for now. I think that, you know, there was some thought in terms of, you know, there had been a big increase at one time. And, you know, but per Kathleen talking about the expanded job responsibilities, that it wasn't the same position. Certainly there's merit to that. You know, in the last couple of years, you know, we've had, you know, an acceleration of inflation as well. You know, so it's, as much as it's only been a year and a half, there's been a number of things that changed. But that's the reason, I mean, as I look back and I think of why I voted as I did, that was an influence to me.
So the language of the statutory duties hasn't changed, but the scope of some of them has. Okay, because of recent expanded legislation and regulation of elections particularly. Okay. But that's also was here in 2020, right? We had those. And was that considered in the recommendation from 2021?
Was what considered in that?
The expansion of voting rights, expansion of non, or of absentee voting and so forth. Is that considered?
No, not at all.
I know it wasn't considered by the county clerk at the elections bureau of the county.
Yeah, I don't think you're talking about that. Oh.
I think we've had more time to think about it, just, you know, overall with the news, you know, it's certainly is more focused today than, to me, it just seems more on the front page, front burner than it had been.
Can we get more detail on the process of early voting that you discussed? Okay.
And when the salary was set for the clerk's position at 75,000, did you look at similar data?
No.
Okay.
That's what,
We had some information, didn't we?
Well, okay,
Michigan,
so
but it wasn't good
I think it's
information.
flawed information if you just strictly look at MTA.
Yeah, I think that's my opinion. How I read
So that's, yeah, my statement just now was not correct.
Just as a point of reference, if we look at the 2021 and 2022 numbers, the combined inflation of those 2 years is about 14%. And if you look at current salary of 84,000 and the proposal of 96, that's also 14%. So it's not just the bar graph in terms of where the number came from. It also does match the CPI numbers that you brought in, Kevin. But once again, that if you sit on the taxpayer side of the negotiating table, and a whole lot of taxpayers in our township that have not increased their incomes by 14% in the last 2 years, so.
Well, I put a number up here that's significant. The township just approved a package for our new township manager, $165,000 a year.
What was the most recent non-interim township manager?
105.
Okay, that's what I was
David
thinking.
Rowley was making.
I was thinking 100, so.
105. Sorry?
We could go down a lot of paths here.
Yeah, let's not go back that way, yeah.
So that was a board decision
Yeah.
based on the times.
Yeah.
We'll call it the times in Scio Township.
Interesting, okay. I appreciate you putting that up because I was not aware of that. Okay, so I don't think I have anything else to say at this moment about the clerk.
Anyone else? Well, with that, we'll move on to the review of historical salaries, and we have that on page 7. For the,
Can we talk about the treasurer?
Get in there somewhere.
we talked about the treasurer at the last meeting.
We did make a determination.
No, we didn't make it, we haven't made a determination on anybody.
I didn't.
Or- Did we not?
Okay, so I don't think we had this level of discussion
Yeah.
for supervisor or treasurer.
I assume that would be part of the next conversation, but
Okay, that's fine. I just, in my mind, I would like to apply some of our methodology. Whatever we determine for the clerk, it should be for the treasurer and the supervisor.
I apologize because I thought that, just in terms of reviews, that we had talked about their responsibilities at the last meeting, which is what I thought of as these conversations.
oh, I see.
And that the conversations, once we reviewed their responsibilities, that then we would go into conversations, or we would go into discussion on the appropriate income levels. So if we want to go back and do that again, we can.
That's fine. I would just mention one, I thought about this in advance, the baby elephant in the room. That's my own joke. I want everybody to know that the current treasurer has stated she's not running in 2024.
Okay.
So we're strictly evaluating based on
Position.
position. It wasn't a big, it's just a baby.
Baby elephant, yeah.
So with that, the income levels, actually, and Christie has sent us this information as well. And the information that Christie sent was from 2012 to 2022. And there wasn't there wasn't a significant amount of difference in those from the information you're getting here starting in 2016. Let's still go back. So.
So what are we focusing on now?
Well, just a discussion of kind of the past history of these positions and the income that they received. We've kind of gotten into that, with the conversation on the trustees as well as the treasurer. We haven't had those in-depth conversations about the supervisor and the treasurer.
So on the treasurer, has there always been a deputy treasurer?
No.
So somebody knows that information.
Yes.
Can you share
Well-
share a little bit more?
The statute requires a deputy
Requires
treasurer.
Yes.
So I do not mean to quarrel with Commissioner Benson, but
Okay,
my client, Scio Township, always has a deputy treasurer.
Okay, I take that back. We
have
haven't had a
different
deputy,
duties.
the current deputy treasurer has many more, has a larger portfolio.
Absolutely correct.
We have in the past, the assessor has been, the deputy treasurer.
Oh,
And I believe that the current assessor, she was the deputy treasurer for a little bit.
And I thought that also too, with the expansion of that role at our last meeting in December 2021, was that we kept the treasurer's, the recommendation or determination was to keep it the same because of that additional support that they were getting from expanding the deputies' responsibilities.
okay.
That was my recollection of our reason and rationale behind, that vote.
All right, but now we need to determine compensation that will bring a flood of qualified candidates for the next election cycle, right?
And what we've heard is if we applied whatever methodology to one position, we should apply it to
Like, oh,
because now
they all have responsibilities.
They do.
They all have a role. And, so I agree with that. So would we like to get into we've had some broader discussion or more in-depth discussion actually on the trustees and their time and, how different people feel differently about, what would be the right amount. We've had some conversations on the clerk and what would be the right amount. And I think this is a good time to start those conversations on the supervisor as well as the treasurers. Any thoughts?
Well, okay, I'll jump in. So if we just look at the inflation rate and think of that as being 14% for the last 2 years combined, we're at 46,000 for the supervisor for the part-time job.
Let me suggest, there are a number of different CPI figures coming out of Bureau of Labor Statistics. What we should do is maybe take a look at what those different CPI types, there's a CPI-U, the base and core, and there's a CPI-W. See if we can gather information on those. Let's say since 2010 through 2022, see how those compare and see how those cumulative over 21, 22 would affect the base rates that we've got in their current salaries, if that's reasonable. And that would give us, some hard numbers to look at in our next meeting. And I know where to get those, you know where to get them too.
What were the various ones?
CPI-W, CPI urban, core CPI, and the index for energy and food. They have different measures for them. And they all should be historically available on the BLS website.
Yes.
And I'm happy to compile them in a single table.
No, thanks.
Is that a way to proceed?
That would be helpful, certainly.
It won't solve, the questions about that we have about the number of meetings that trustees may have, but maybe it'll take us a step further. And I'll also pick up the countywide tax increments, property tax increments from county equalization for the same time series.
So is that sort of correlating the cost of living?
It does, you know, again, it's proposal A that says your property valuation for tax purposes goes up either by the CPIW or 5%, whichever is lower.
Right.
And that's what taxpayers experience. And that may have some relevance.
Relevance to the revenue we generate.
Certainly. And relevance to, you know, taxpayers'
Level of pain, I
level
would
of
say.
pain.
Yeah.
And what they say about any incremental pay we may recommend.
Useful information.
Yeah, and that pretty much knocks out the next item on the agenda too, which is pretty.
We looked at some of the salaries in other townships, but we haven't looked at treasurer and supervisor.
Well, I've researched it.
Okay.
I can add it up there, I guess. Because I didn't send it out, I just got it in the past couple of days. Actually, I have Pittsfield and I have Ypsilanti Township. I don't have Superior, they didn't. I left a voicemail, they haven't called me back.
And I think Pittsfield and Ypsilanti are probably more peer to us than Superior.
Right. So for, you have that too, don't you?
Yes. The thing's rocking.
Yeah.
Did you have Pittsfield?
Yes.
Those things slide up.
Pittsfield is, where are you, supervisor?
Any of them? Well, this doesn't compare.
Slides up, Jen. There you go.
Oh, technology.
So treasurer is.
Is
Is that what that's called, Kathleen?
Low tech, but that.
Treasurer and clerk at Pittsfield are the same, and I'll round up just because I like round numbers, 97,698.
I have this one already.
I only rounded up 23 cents.
Okay, well, that one I'm okay with.
It's interesting that Ypsilanti Township and Pittsfield set their treasurer and clerk at the same rate.
Mhm.
Maybe they've gone through this exercise, huh?
Yeah. Pittsfield has the comp commission too.
And then you could argue for the assessed value in Scio Township is bigger than either of those.
Right.
And so there's more tax revenue and investment possibility and responsibility.
But they're charter, so they have a higher base
Yeah.
millage rate.
So
Till we get to our special assessment district.
that's kind of enlightening in terms of the treasurer compensation. And I have to wonder, is that because they have had to hire new treasurers or, or is that because they have longevity in that position or because they don't have longevity in that position? It'd be interesting to.
I read the bios in Pittsfield Township and Ypsilanti Township, and now I can't remember, but it's not that they're brand new to the position.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's not what we've experienced here.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, that's wild.
But both of those areas have experienced more growth recently than we have, and more struggle after the Great Recession, or during the Great Recession as well, in terms of foreclosures and property changes.
Something to think about.
And just to point this out, Pittsfield Township, oh, no, we're not talking supervisor. Never mind.
Well, let's talk about supervisor.
Well, I was reading about, in some of the materials, that the supervisor has assessor responsibilities.
Well, their
You have
charter,
to be a certified assessor that they may get.
charter township, it has different statutory duties for supervisor. So oftentimes the charter township will not have a township manager.
Thank you, Brad. Well, that, I think that pretty much completes the day in terms of our conversations here.
It's like, I feel like we've made some progress, but at the same time, I'm a little concerned that personally I haven't made as much progress as I would have hoped to, but, okay.
I'm glad I don't feel alone in that.
Well, how might we improve that?
Oh, well, the, in terms of having information from the marketplace, but it sounds like there isn't a real good source for that. And like townships of a similar financial structure with similar incomes, similar population would kind of be the starting point, but it sounds like in Michigan, we really don't have a lot of options like that. In other states, I think there'd be so many other confounding variables that it'd be difficult to even have a handle on that. And then as far as, thinking of the other side of the equation, having compensation and a package that would interest the incoming potential treasurers, it doesn't seem to be that tied to compensation. It seems to be more tied to other things in the township. And maybe that's not true so much of the treasurer, but it seems to be that way in terms of trustees, and the supervisor might be somewhere in the middle. So, and just throwing this out, if our treasurer needs to live in the township, how many people with treasurer qualifications live in our township now, and what fraction of those are likely to have any interest in working for the township? Right? That seems like a reasonable question, and Diane, you probably know or have a better idea on that than anybody.
Well, I would say that if at a salary of 65,000, we're not going to find somebody.
Zero. Yeah.
Unless it's a retiree.
Looking for a second career.
Looking for a second career. But I just know, I know it being recorded, that next time I vote in Scio Township, I will be looking at what the job is and whether or not that person has the qualifications to do the particular job, which I don't know that I've done before.
Okay.
I don't think I've done before.
Well,
So I think the compensation needs to be increased for the treasurer in particular in order to track good candidates for that.
yeah, okay, I guess, in my only.
Just looking at people that do the same work, working at the University of Michigan, it would be at least an $85,000 a year position for that for that type of work.
Yeah. Now, would those $85,000 people have a deputy working for them?
They'd have a staff, yes, an accountant working for them.
Okay. Yeah, so I can totally, visualize that same thing. It seems like for $60,000 or $65,000, you can't hire somebody that both has the capabilities in accounting, but also has the ability to take the responsibilities, but all right, so back to the question though, how many qualified interested candidates? Well, probably 65,000, the answer would be 0 in the township.
Never know.
And do people move into the township to take positions as clerk, supervisor?
You have to live in the township.
Yes.
To even apply?
There's a
Well,
certain.
you're
Yes.
running for office.
Yeah,
You have
okay,
a
I guess that
certain
makes
number of
sense.
days you have to be resident.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they don't need to be property owners, they just need to have an address.
They need to be registered voters in the
Registered
township.
voter.
Okay,
They can be renters or owners.
Oh, you could be a renter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not everybody owns a home.
That's true.
okay, that's good, I didn't know,
And also
that's my
too,
concern, right?
And this is always that public deal in terms of somebody disqualified.
Anybody can get the 15 signatures and put their name out there.
Yeah,
And you'd like to think the best qualified person will get it, but you don't know.
well, so how does a township let our voting population know what the proper qualifications would be for that position?
I don't know if it's the township's role to
Right.
publicize that, other than in its official documents. We're talking about how a person persuades people in November or August to check a box for them. That's really up to the candidate and to people who may decide to support and endorse.
Okay. So I guess all the township has is the statutory duties really to, interesting government structure here. It's,
It's enlightening.
it is enlightening, yes. Okay, I'm done with that topic.
Anybody else have anything they want to add to today's conversation?
I have one thing.
Yes.
I just want to remind you, you have 4 weeks and 3 days to complete your work.
So we need to decide in terms of, we have some other information we're going to be looking at. Jim's going to be pulling some consumer price index information. We're going to ask about the process, the change of process with the early voting. We're going to verify the board meeting, additional compensation for those what meetings. And got a note here in terms of managing financials, but I think that's just a note that was it. That's my note to myself. So those are the 3 additional pieces of information that we're going to be looking at to continue our conversation next time. And I think so per Jim's comment, we got 4 weeks and 3 days, otherwise known as 31 days, to check the box on all this. And in doing so, when will be our next meeting? Do we need to have a meeting next week? Are we thinking we're gonna need to have a meeting every week from here till the next 31 days? Or do we think we might be able to? And maybe we figure that out as we go along. So since the clock is ticking though, my first suggestion is we have another meeting next Friday. And next Friday, we're gonna have to figure out when we're gonna vote on this because, we will be going up against the wall to get it done. So I recommend that we have a meeting next Friday,
You
1
need a
o'clock.
motion?
Well, I was gonna ask, first of all, Jim, was there a time for him next week if we were to do this? Because his schedule this week pushed it up an hour.
It looks like I can meet next Friday afternoon. I plan to be out of town on Friday the 30th. But I could meet with you by Zoom. Like I could sign in by Zoom, or I could have someone else come.
So does anybody make a recommendation to have a meeting next Friday?
Yeah, I agree with that. So I'll make the motion that we have a meeting next Friday, the 23rd.
Any preference for 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock with people? Preferred earlier or later?
I would prefer 2 o'clock, just because I have another commitment.
Sure.
If that works with everyone else, that's.
And I'll remind you that, because you don't have a regular meeting schedule published, Chrissy, this will have to get published
Today.
with the regular Open Meetings Act notice of a meeting.
Yeah.
One question, I know that there has been some disagreement between Clerk Flintoff and the board about what her additional duties might be, and that went to court. And Judge Connors did not, ruled for the township. But I understand that's under appeal.
Yes.
Is that true? And what's the progress on that case? Is there any?
It's under appeal.
Okay.
Last I knew, the appeal was still pending.
Okay. Now, are you working that one or is that?
No, that's insurance counsel.
Okay.
And that was about additional duties?
Now,
That wasn't what I understood.
the basis of the suit is contending that the board took statutory
That's what I
duties
thought.
away from the clerk and assigned them to manager or.
So that's different than additional duties, so, yeah.
Well, I understand that Connors said, well, that's really up to the township. That was his short version of his decision,
Well,
which I'm not qualified to summarize.
Is someone taking on the responsibility of looking at how the election?
I'm gonna ask him.
Okay,
Good, see what I can find out.
okay.
I put.
I was just gonna
further
volunteer in
questions.
case.
Yeah, thanks. At this time, we'd like to take some public comment.
Oh, boy.
I don't see any hands raised for public comment. That's what I was thinking too. Go up there, public comment.
How many attendees do we have by Zoom?
4.
Well,
And no hands raised.
Thanks for zooming in.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
thanks for
you.
zooming in.
Well, with that, anybody motion for the end of today?
Motion to.
I'll support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Report and conquer. See you next Friday.
All right.